All right, good morning, everybody. My name's Craig Dalton. I'm CEO of a company called DodoCase. We're the world's leading provider of custom-branded virtual reality headsets. We were one of Google's first partners in the Google Cardboard ecosystem going back to 2014. We've had the good pleasure of participating in well over 300 mass market campaigns using cardboard virtual reality headsets, which has given us a great perspective on the market and allowed us to work with some really wonderful brands who are investing in VR. It's left me personally passionate about bringing people into the world of VR. I've done so many consumer demos, and the reaction is always the same. You put this on their head with the phone in it and a great application. They usually don't move. Then you tap them on the shoulder, you ask them to move, and that polite grin turns into a shit-eating smile. They can't stop laughing. People are grabbing the headset away from them. And I think that type of reaction is why brands are so excited to work in this new medium. So with that, I'd like to introduce the panel. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Why don't we start with Shauna down at the end there.
Hi, I'm Shauna Heller. I'm the founder of Clay Park VR. It's a corporate VR strategy and advisory service for brands, institutions, and companies trying to find their path in VR. I formerly spent a year and a half at Oculus as a developer relations specialist who worked with non-gaming, non-entertainment developers. So that included arts and culture, architecture, automotive, enterprise, education, sports, music, a lot of agency work, working with the agencies, bringing brand stories to life in 360 video for the most part, occasionally in VR. And I left 5 weeks ago to address some of the broader needs of the market to help get people ready for VR.
My name is Daria Chichi. I'm the director of a group called Zero Code within OMD, which is an advertising agency. And my team does gaming initiatives for a number of clients, including Gatorade, Pepsi, Nissan, and a whole Activision, and a bunch of others. So my angle started from the gaming side, doing in-game integrations and gaming programs, et cetera. And then when VR came along a couple of years ago, I got involved with it. A couple of Kickstarter later, I was full in, a believer, and started working with clients like Gatorade to bring VR to our clients.
Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Miller, and I head up digital at Gatorade, and that includes content, social, gaming, and anything that's on the fringe edge of consumer engagement. And so VR is definitely very much in that wheelhouse, and so really is trying to figure out what our strategy, our approach is there, and crafting that as part of our team's initiative.
And my name is Christian Diekman with Cedar Fair Entertainment. We are an owner and operator of 11 amusement parks in the US and Canada, including California's Great America, right down the road from here, and Knott's Berry Farm in Southern California. We partnered with DodoCase and another company called 3D Live to build a VR app that would promote a new ride that's coming out next year at our flagship park at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, called Valraven. It's going to be the world's tallest, fastest, longest dive coaster. And what we did, we created a VR experience to experience the ride before it's built.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So for me, Christian and Jeff, you guys are two of the most important people in this room because you actually chose, you're not in the VR industry, yet you chose to invest in it, which is actually making the industry that all of us need to happen because of that investment. So I'd love to hear from both of you as sort of how you first came about getting exposed to VR, and then how you made that decision and how you advocated internally to get the funds required to do what you did.
So I'll just say, from an amusement park and location-based entertainment perspective, when I joined Cedar Fair a couple years ago, we're seeing a lot of innovation in the space where digital is meeting physical rides and attractions. And so I thought there was an opportunity here to figure out how to do a better job of leveraging digital. And that sort of led me to experiencing VR. I think I was at E3 in LA a few years ago, and that was the first time I ever had a VR experience, and it just completely blew me away. So part of the challenge was, okay, how do we take this incredible wow moment and take it to our consumers? And it really fit in nicely with a few things we're trying to do in the amusement park space, which is, hey, if you're not in one of our parks, how do we take the amusement park experience to you? And then more broadly as well, how do we take VR and take it into an amusement park experience as a way to enhance it? So that's really how I stumbled across VR, and just, again, want to bring that wow moment to consumers, similar to what I experienced and what many people in this room experienced the first time they tried out a VR headset.
What was the first platform you actually tried? Do you remember at E3?
I think it was an Oculus,
okay,
at Oculus's booth at E3.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, same for me. I experienced it a couple years ago at E3 on an Oculus. The first time we got serious about it was at CES. Daria and I met with a couple of different developers and planted this idea. For Gatorade, it's really important for us to think about how do we start to set the stage of being a sports performance innovator. This was our 50th year anniversary, so we did a lot of time looking back, celebrating the past, and we really want to think about how do we look forward and being credible in terms of innovation. And one way we're doing that is how we think about our media, too, and our consumer experiences. So what we really focused on was how do we bring the athlete experience closer to the fans of the game. And so we used Bryce Harper and had him at National Stadium and actually created an experience where you became Bryce Harper at the plate in the bottom of the ninth inning, and you go against a real team of players, and it's a mix of live action and CGI, and you actually ultimately hit a home run to win the game. And so in terms of internally how we pitched that, it was we have some budget that we ultimately set aside for these things that are on the fringe that we know are not going to have massive payback in year one just based on distribution alone. But we set out a very clear learning agenda, and we set out a very clear earned media strategy. And so for us, it was how do we make sure that we're getting eyeballs to understand that we're doing this type of content, both from content we're creating around it, the surround sound content, but also from earned media. And then how are we making sure that we're learning as we go? So that was the way that we sold it in.
Was it something that you introduced to OMD, or did OMD introduce it to you?
No, I would say that Zero Code specifically has been a leader in this field, and they brought to us a bunch of different vendors. They knew we were looking for something on the edge, and that VR is something we had talked about. So it was interesting in the regard that typically we work with creative agencies. This time we had an idea in mind, and we worked directly with OMD and the production company, The Mill, to create it.
Okay. So for Dario and Shauna, you guys have a challenging task in that you are aware of all the things that are going on in VR. I know both of you are super passionate about the industry. So with all these shiny things that we could show people, how do you guys decide when's the right time to introduce things to clients, and what are those right things to introduce?
Well, let's take timing first. I think timing is important in VR because it takes a while before you take the client through the rationale for using something like VR. First of all, it doesn't matter how many presentations you give somebody. If Jeff didn't put a headset on his head and tried a few things, he probably will have bought him the idea from a PowerPoint. So that takes time because obviously you need to get everybody the right demo, et cetera, to get them excited about it. But we also try to keep in mind, let's do something where the specific client is going to learn from the experience. Is going to learn how to use the platform, and then they can move on to the next step. So we don't want to go all the way out and wait a year to do something on Vive when we can do in the next few months something simpler, maybe on mobile. And that's always the first step. What we tell our clients is, don't wait for all these devices to be in market. Start learning now, and this is something that we started doing, a couple of years ago. Start learning now, because by the time the devices are going to hit the market, the consumer products, Oculus Rift, PSVR, et cetera, you're already going to be behind a lot of other brands have been testing. The learning curve, as everybody in this room knows, is so steep that you got to try things out. It's not like your creative agency is going to wake up one morning and say, hey, that commercial I'm thinking about, I can just do it in VR the same way. That just doesn't work. So the shiny object eventually is still a shiny object, right? For a lot of clients, even the simplest form of Google Cardboard or Dodo case, it's already a shiny object. So they're not even thinking about Vive as a shiny object. Just VR in general is shiny right now.
So, Shauna, you must have had this challenge at Oculus. It's not even a commercial product yet I can name a dozen projects that brands pursued just while a development kit was out there.
Yeah, that was an interesting situation to find everyone in. And I think going to kind of back to the broader topic is when brands and agencies, specifically brands, are looking at engaging with new technology, I think something important to remember that then makes everyone's the process easier is, are you, because you hear this often, we want as a company to look innovative. And my first reaction was always, we want you to just be innovative. You know, there's that difference. There are brands out there every day who are just like, you know, we want to execute some small or large VR application so that they can tick that off their box, so that they can, you know, say that they have done something. And I think really, and so that they can appear innovative. And I think what's really exciting for brands is to actually focus those resources and energy and interest in being innovative. There are so many challenges in VR that we have to solve, everything from locomotion to performance rates and like so many different things that I think being able to say to the brands, great, we are thrilled you are interested in innovation, but instead of appearing it, let's enable you to just become innovative. So that becomes kind of a bar that you can use when you're engaging with people, like what is their priority? And more brands we're seeing, you know, or I'm seeing, are beginning to start to understand that difference, and that's nice.
Certainly, and Daria, you mentioned something on this thread earlier. There are brands that just want to do that crazy next-gen thing strictly for PR purposes, and there's other brands that really want a large audience to experience VR. Is that what you're seeing out there?
I mean, you know, right now is a lot of it is PR, right? Because you don't have a lot of those devices in the hands of consumers. I think there are some brands that are interested in doing an event, so South by Southwest or Comic-Con, et cetera. We worked on a project with Shauna early on Warner Bros. Moving to the Storm, and that was more, they did it for Comic-Con primarily, and then they brought it to different markets. But right now it's mostly PR, again, learning how to use it, get some understanding on the platform, what can I do, what can I not do, what is not right to do, and also get some exposure, but not traditional media exposure. That's going to come a little bit later. Jeff, you can...
Yeah, no, I think that's well put. So I put it akin to, you know, we're in a CPG brand in space where e-commerce right now is really small percentage of our business. But we know that it's going to transform very quickly with Uber and Amazon and Walmart and how they're investing. It's going to change their grocery shopping experience. If you try to measure it on direct sales today, you're never going to see the return on ad spend or the ROI. So VR is in a very similar space. I have to be able to justify internally that I'm going to get this earned media exposure, that I'm going to get very clear learnings, but it's not a one-off. It's got to be done through the lens, at least for our brand, that we are looking to be a thought leader from a brand perspective within the VR space. We already know that gaming pays off tremendously for us as a brand. We already know that our athlete relationships are a big differentiator for us versus our competition. So we see VR as a place that is going to scale very quickly, that we want to be prepared that when that happens, that we already have the best institutional knowledge and infrastructure and partners set up that we can take advantage of that scaling.
You spoke pretty briefly about the campaign, but it was really well done and really interesting. Could you talk just a little bit more about the details of the campaign? Because it was multi-threaded. It was both a VR experience, but then also showing how people are reacting to having a VR experience, which I think was super clever.
Absolutely. So what we did is after a Nationals game, we met with Bryce Harper in the middle of the night at National Stadium, and we recorded his actual voice, what he's saying as he's thinking in his head as he's going through an at-bat. So whether it's a ball, a strike, ultimately hits a home run, we're recording that with little microphones around his entire head, so as you're going through the experience, whatever direction you're looking, you're actually hearing the audio in different ways. And then what we did is we had him come out of the batter's circle, and you actually become Bryce Harper. We set up a 14-camera GoPro rig on home plate with the umpire from the game before, and a crew of minor league players dressed as the Cubs, which pained me because I'm a giant Cubs fan, and he ends up hitting a home run off them. But we had a catcher, we had a pitcher who was the AAA pitcher who had actually pitched against Bryce Harper, and we're actually throwing 90-plus mile-an-hour fastballs and curveballs and sliders to the actual rig itself at Bryce Harper's eye level. Then in post-production, what we did is we actually looked at Bryce Harper's stance, how he walks, how he bats, and we recreated that through CGI. So you become Bryce Harper, and it's a mix of live action and CGI as you're going through this experience. And so it's a really cool 3.5-minute experience that intermixes the actual setting of National Stadium and Bryce Harper that makes it feel very real. But we knew we weren't going to get scale distribution from that alone, so what we did is that we then had a behind-the-scenes video that we released, and we did a content piece where we went to the Little Nationals team, a local baseball team, gave them the experience of actually going through this headset, going through Bryce Harper's at-bat, filmed their reactions, and then we had Bryce Harper appear. So as they took off the headset, Bryce Harper was standing directly in front of them. And that's the content piece that 95% of people actually saw. Because very few people actually did the YouTube 360 or saw the behind-the-scenes video. Their accessibility to the content was through this really cool content piece that was just kids getting to interact with Bryce Harper and being surprised by him. So that's how we thought about ways that making sure that we're getting scale and more bang for our buck, but still making sure that we're learning in the process.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, just search it on YouTube. It's actually really well done. We're always looking for those reaction videos to sell people on how cool VR is, and these kids just go nuts.
You could tell for 3 seconds because he's wearing his full uniform that there is that moment of like, wait, is this real or is this fake? Like, am I still in the experience?
Yeah.
It kind of tripped with their head a bit.
Really, really cool stuff. So Christian, let's talk a little bit more about the campaign you did. And did you sort of advocate with your creative agency that this is something you want to do, or was it a collaborative effort?
Yeah, this was really an in-house conceived idea that we build momentum for internally, put together the business case, outlined, this is what it's going to cost, this is what we're going to get for it, here's where we think the benefit is. I think very similar to Jeff, we outlined, this is not only about something that's going to get us earned media and impressions, this is about getting our feet wet with the medium, because we saw broader potential for VR within our park. So this is a way for us to get experience with the technology. And so I think we laid out the case, got the executive team on board with it, and we're able to activate it. I think the great thing for us was we were taking something that we already did every time we do an announcement. We do an announcement event. We create a point of view video for distribution on YouTube. So we're able to leverage that announcement event and those 3D assets that were already being created, and then just create a Unity app that had the ride in it. So it wasn't a lot of cost just to take those assets and put it into a new framework. So it was just sort of a natural extension of some things that we were already doing, which made it an easier sell. And then we used the Dodo case cover as an invitation to the actual event. So that was a great way to send things out to media in advance and VIPs and get them excited about it before they even knew what was happening with the ride.
One of the things I learned from working with you was that there's this extremely passionate roller coaster enthusiast community. And I think, obviously, you knew that and you got that going in, but I think what you did was really cool was you used VR to bring them into an experience that they couldn't otherwise have. And we, obviously, as an industry, we talk about that a lot, and both these campaigns did exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, we did very little to sort of push downloads of the app. We didn't really do anything but just sort of viral and social media marketing. Got 10,000 downloads of the app, which I think we were pretty happy with. And I think just as exciting was we had 500,000 views on of the 360 POV video as well, and that's something we probably would not have done if we had not created the VR app. So that was a way to not only get value out of the people who are downloading the app and experiencing it in true VR, but also sort of leverage that buzz to get additional people to look at the 360 video too. So we saw it as sort of a multi-tiered approach to building buzz around the ride, and this just added to that.
Yeah, it seems like that's emerging as a best practice for brands and advertisers who are coming in. And Dario, maybe this is something across the clients you work with, you're seeing that we know we're inherently limited as an industry by people who own VR viewers or who are provided them as part of the campaign. So looking at other mediums to distribute the content as well as the medium it was originally intended for seems to be a key part of the strategy.
Yeah, I would say it's interesting. I was watching Jimmy Kimmel. He says something about people watching other people playing games, and he made a comment about that. And obviously, the Twitch and YouTube community went wild. So he went and met with two influencers from the gaming space, and they were trying to explain to him what's the appeal of watching somebody else playing a game. And the first thing that they actually showed him was Oculus Rift. I think it was even a DK1 demo of somebody, one of the influencers having their parents play around with a roller coaster thing and their reaction. So a lot of people, the first time they get their exposure on this is watching somebody else do something silly while wearing a VR device. I think that's step number one. Things like VR LA and other places. I saw Cosmo here somewhere. I mean, I remember going to the first one, was 100 people. The last one was a couple of thousand. So that's the first step, is YouTube, watching somebody else seeing it, and then you actually go try it out. The challenge is going to be, I think, for the product themselves, is like how many of those devices are you going to have out at retailers for people to try, you know, in mass scale. How many people are going to be able to do that at a store level, you know, with all the concerns that, you know, some people may have on putting on their face a device that somebody else just tried out. But, you know, from a marketing perspective, I think with, you know, just around the corner, I think year one, I expect it to be actually more successful than a lot of people think. I think a lot of people have been saving for the past 2 years. They've been putting away their money, so I don't think there's going to be a problem of install base in year one as some others think. Yes, it's not going to be 100 million units year one, but it's going to be more than many people expect.
Yeah, Shauna, what are your thoughts on that? Where do you see, how fast do you see the pace of progress of penetration?
I think that I'm similar to Dario, that I think everyone is going to be surprised by the adoption, and maybe it's because I spent so much time learning what people were using the headsets for in the enterprise space and industry, and, you know, the non-gaming, non-entertainment, that I just see such a embracing of the technology, and the fact that, you know, Gear announced today it's pre-order, so that's kind of a good day for VR, but I'm of a similar, where I think it's going to happen a lot faster than people anticipate.
Are there some industries, since you spend a lot of time focusing on non-entertainment, what are the industries that you feel like are showing a lot of enthusiasm?
It is a lot of the early adopters that I think we were talking about yesterday, in terms of arts and culture and architecture and automotive, like, you know, people who were designing in 3D before, you know, in virtual spaces before there were actual headsets. Architecture being one of them, automotive another, the theme park market, you know, and other construction industries. They do a lot of designing, a ton of designing in 3D to make sure that, you know, it's as good a building a project as it can be before it launches. So I think there'll be kind of this ramp up where we have all of these developers who have been doing these custom applications for this developer or that developer or this architect or that architect, that are going to kind of start to form. And I think that sort of industry use will drive some of the other adoption. Hey, I was using this at the office, you know, I'm going to bring one home, that sort of thing. And I think maybe that gear and mobile in general will drive a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my bias is probably abundantly clear that I believe smartphone VR is the way to go. I'm not one of those people in the industry that is saying pitting smartphone VR against any of the other high fidelity units. I think both markets are going to be massive.
Absolutely.
Clearly what we're seeing, and anybody who's done any of these experiences or any of the smartphone VR-based experiences, is that it's going to be the gateway drug to the entire industry, and it's going to be a lot easier to convince someone to spend $400 to $1,500 on a higher fidelity unit if they've had a first taste of VR.
Absolutely, and fill it with content that people are that are used to, right? With 360 video content. Oh, this kind of looks like a movie. I know what a movie looks like, but oh, I can look behind me and around me. And you start putting content in the headsets that people recognize, and then suddenly they're in there, and that's that gateway, that we all talk about in terms of now that you've got that headset on, you're motivated to look around in it. What else is in here? And that's where some of, where people will have that search and discovery of perhaps some of the non-360 content, some of the gaming content or experiences or apps and things like that. But you have to start, with content that they recognize.
Yeah.
Not have to, but is it?
I think that's the battle we have as an industry. It's really, it's a ground battle right now. Because these guys, they were forward thinking and they were willing to spend discretionary marketing dollars into these campaigns, which is awesome. But if there's not an addressable market for it, it's gonna be a small bucket, but it can be huge.
Well, I think what's interesting is that both of them mentioned that they had gone to E3. And I lead off conversations about VR in this, that it's show and tell technology. Mm-hmm. You can talk about it, all day long, but until you're putting someone in the headset and you're sharing an experience with them, that do they finally get it? I'd been telling my family about, VR for 3 years. And they're like, oh, Shauna and her emerging technology thing, whatever. And then I took it home over the summer, and I put all of my family through it. And, this is Middle America. This is Michigan and Indiana. And they were like, why would I ever take this off? And that really, that is the power of these particular headsets and the experiences that they're having in that. And so I think that's kind of a powerful story to keep in mind as we're talking about content.
Absolutely.
I want to add something on that because, my career was built around gaming specifically and working with clients to integrate them around the gaming experience or inside the gaming experience. And it has always been a little bit of a challenge if there was a client that just didn't get gaming. Their kids, maybe they're playing, but they don't play themselves. It's very hard to get them to understand what that means, how a brand can be around that. But with VR, it literally takes me 3 seconds. I just put the headset on their head, and in 3 seconds they know what's going on and how it's going to work. And that's the incredible power of VR. That I think that's what's going to accelerate everything so much faster. There's some PlayStation guys here. There's in the gaming industry that pass along of 3 to 4 players for every game that you sell. I think VR is going to be much higher than that. Probably 10, 15. Think about everybody that buys one of those headsets. They're going to want to share with everybody that they know, even people that they don't know, neighbors. They're going to bang on their door and say, come check it out.
Right.
So
for the campaigns, Daria, that you've been involved in to date, it seems like you're building the content from the ground up. Are we at a point where you're looking at some of the people in this room and the broader the industry to say, like, oh, we want to do advertising within your application, or we want to co-brand the application you're working on? Or is it too early for that?
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time actually. So I have a whole team that spends all day looking at what everybody else is doing. We go to events like this and others and try things first person. It's one thing to read something on a blog or Road to VR or something like that, but it's another actually to try the demo, and then from there you actually see how a brand can fit around that experience and maybe make it better, maybe help it. Get on a bigger stage if you wish. Maybe right now it's something that is only built for a Google Cardboard type of experience, but maybe we can make it more complex and interesting for the audience. So there's a lot of work in terms of trying things out. Try everything that seems interesting to you and for your clients, and find the right developer. I think that's key. There are a lot of experiences out there that I'm seeing that are this probably could have been better with a different developer that we know. But you're not gonna understand that until you actually meet with all the developers and see what their specialty is. There are specific things that developers have, like somebody's better with CG, somebody's better with doing 360 video. And whenever you hear that somebody says I can do everything, it's probably not true. There are rare cases that happens, but
they're going to sub some of it out to actual game engine developers and whatnot.
From a brand's perspective, for us, when we evaluate it, it's got to be true to our brand, right? There's hundreds of sports VR experiences out there, and everyone and their brothers reaching out to me or Dario to try to sell us on something. But the reality is, like, we look at what we do with the Bryce Harper, one of our other Gatorade athletes, bringing their experience to life in an authentic way. It's something that we would be willing to lean into. We look at what we do with Madden, 2K, other gaming integrations. Those really pay off for us because the gamers, who are basically football players when they're not in the football field, they're playing Madden, or basketball players when they're not on the court, they're playing 2K. When they see the Gatorade integrations within it, and they see the product messaging that's giving them boosts, it feels really authentic. And rather than being adverse to advertising, that's something that they're willing to learn about the education of the product within that context. So same thing applies to VR. If there's a way to do it from an interactive standpoint within the context of the authentic game experience, it would be interesting. Or finally, within just the idea of training. We know VR at the NFL level, they're already using it to learn how to read defenses, to learn wide receiver routes. That's something that you could take more broadly to colleges, to high schools. All of those examples are examples that we feel would be credible for our brand to deliver. We're not just going to slap our logo on some random sport experience.
Right. So given what you experienced with what you guys did, what's the enthusiasm level internally for VR?
It's really high. I mean, the reality is we did focus groups coming out of it, and beyond the novelty of it being VR and everyone freaking out when they have their first experience, what they played back to us is this experience of being Bryce Harper, seeing the Gatorade messaging, us trying to deliver this inspiring experience. That was our core objective of winning in the moment and Gatorade fueling that. It completely exceeded expectations with everyone we spoke to because they were just so open, much like gaming, to that branded experience. So really high. I think any reservations that we have are how quickly is it going to scale? And what we know very clearly is where we got so much love from earned now on the upfront, everybody's doing branded VR experiences at this point. So it's going to be really hard to differentiate yourselves as brands. It's the novelty of it starting to wear off, especially as devices are starting to go out into the consumer market. So for us, it's got to turn from something that we get an undue advantage because we're an early adopter to now that there's many more adopters, it's something that's really differentiated and purposeful for our brand.
Right. So Christian, we talked about the marketing campaign you guys did to launch the new coaster, but you guys are also exploring VR in some really cool and innovative ways in the park.
Yeah, so again, we really looked at this first stab at VR as a way to start getting experience with the medium, and we think it may continue to have marketing potential for us, but as I mentioned, one of the things we're interested in is how do you take virtual reality to actually enhance what's going on in the park as well, and how can we create experiences for people that cannot be replicated in the living room, because that'll be a point of competitive differentiation for us, and how can we create experiences that also can't be created in the mall down your street. So one of the things that we're testing right now, and it really is only a test where there's a lot we need to figure out about it, is we are putting virtual reality on an actual real live roller coaster. So you're going on a roller coaster, and instead of seeing the track around you and everything else, you're seeing a fantastical environment where you're going through a mine ride, and there's lava, and there's stuff happening around you, and there's a dragon that you're flying on for the second half of the experience. So, what we love about VR is we can potentially take things that we already have in the park and without adding any additional capital or physical infrastructure, create an entirely new experience around that ride. So again, early days, we're testing it, but we think it could have some really exciting potential down the road.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. You do these VR demos, and people have wind machines, and they're trying to simulate all those things that you're really going to get when you're on the roller coaster. So I'm really curious to see how that pans out for you guys.
Yeah, we're really excited about it, and it's not something that you can do even on a motion simulator, and it's certainly not something you can do in a stationary seat. So we really think it could be a point of differentiation for us.
Cool. So we've got time for some audience questions. Let's see one in the middle there. I think there's a mic behind you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for the panel. So one of the big value adds of VR, I think, as a medium is its ability to build empathy with an audience. So I'm curious for you guys, coming from the brand side, can you give me some examples of some projects or some efforts you've made that you felt really went beyond what traditional media can do in terms of building empathy between a consumer and a brand using VR?
Well, I can tell you right now, we haven't done it. I mean, I think that's a great ambition, right? Like, that's our goal of the content we're putting out there right now. We tell stories of young athletes and the adversity that they overcome, and our whole mantra, our brand ethos is winning from within and what that means and how do we bring that to life. I think that's a great ambition for what we'd go. Our first step was telling a 2 to 3 minute story through this idea of taking place in an at-bat in that stadium. I think the next question is, how do you take that storytelling component and then mirror it with what we're trying to do in terms of driving empathy? I have no doubt that the platform has a capability for doing that. What I think is going to be really valuable to us as brands is who is going to be the person that can marry that technical expertise with that creative capability. Because right now, candidly, our creative agencies do not know VR at all. Like we had another example of a VR execution we did with JJ Watt, and it was a nightmare, candidly. Like the execution it wasn't grounded in the technical capabilities, right? Like there was no center of gravity. You got nauseous as you were going through the experience because it wasn't someone who understood the platform. They understood creative storytelling, they understand empathy, but they didn't know how to bring it to life with the new platform. So whoever has the ability to do that, to marry those two things, I think is going to win in the space.
And I just added that, I think in the amusement park and the theme park space, I mean, we're all about building stories and immersive experiences for our guests. So we look at this as a canvas. I don't think we've cracked the code on the best way to do it, but we see it having an excellent future in terms of being a medium for storytelling. There's just so much you can do, and I can have a story unfolding around you that I really can't do anywhere else.
I actually heard from, so we do events where we do for clients, we bring in 70 clients, 80 clients, and we show them different demos. And that was actually one of the questions that came out from some of my clients. How do we build a story around creating empathy for specific subjects that us as a brand would like to cover? So it's coming. I think it's just a matter of getting their feet wet, understanding how it works, and then developing the content for it. But as Jeff said, I think there's, right now the creative shops specifically are just quite not there. That's why we just took advantage of that void and like, hey, we'll do it.
The best example I saw is, I believe it's Samsung, the content piece they put out about a woman giving birth in, I think she was in Perth in Australia.
Yeah. Yep.
And her husband was an offshore oil rigger and he couldn't make it there, so they put a camera rig in the delivery room and you got to see him experience it. So it wasn't necessarily through the actual VR experience itself, but it's how they packaged it into a content piece that was incredibly empathetic.
Another question?
Yeah, so unlike watching a movie or watching TV, you can actually track what somebody is actually looking at in a VR experience. How important is that for brands?
I think for us at least, that is an excellent thing for us to be thinking about. I don't think we're there yet. We're learning how to crawl before we run on this. But I think in the future, being able to see where people are looking and change the content experience around that and have multiple things going on around you and maybe the experience is a little bit different going through it the first time versus the second time I might want to pay attention to something differently. Those are all things we're thinking about, but candidly, I don't think we've quite gotten there yet.
Yeah, I would put it as a priority, and I actually think it's something that we did poorly on that JJ example. Stuff was going behind you, but you didn't have any cue to look. So this comes back to execution, right? Like if you're going to put something that's not in their straight line of sight, the prior session we just had, consumers aren't used to constantly looking behind them. They don't know how to experience the technology. So I think in the early days, it's just how do you have a compelling experience, and then the more multi-platform world, it'll come, especially in the context for us of our gaming partnerships.
One of the interesting things that's come out from a lot of the 360 video guys that I've spoken with is that the consumption time of 360 video can be as much as 20x what a standard video is, because it's like a choose your own adventure. Yeah. Every time you look at it, it can be something else. And I think that's an important metric for the industry to define at some point, is to say, yes, the cost of production for 360 VR is more expensive than 2D video, but the playback and the commitment of the user to that video, the ROI of that far surpasses what we're looking at previously.
Yeah, I think, Craig, repeatability is really important to us. So if we're going to create an experience, how do we get more leverage out of it by getting you to go on the same experience multiple times or have a completely different overlay in the same environment that allows you to get that repeat experience?
Yeah. Seth?
Yeah. I would say one thing on the, in the ad industry, there's a rush to create standards right away so that you can scale really fast. And whenever clients bring that subject up, I think like, just give us some time. We don't need to create standards today. Eventually they'll come, but don't rush to do that now.
I do put on the industry, though, to help define heat mapping of where people are looking. What are those cues that are needed for people to look?
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, that should go to the immersive storytelling. Like, we should have a sense of what are those cues that we need, and what is the likelihood, at what propensity do people really do look behind them, to the left, to the right, versus just in their straight line field of vision.
Yeah. Seth, you've got a question?
Yeah, this is something I'm surprised hasn't come up more during this conference, and this seems like as good a panel as any to raise it. With the New York Times giveaway of 1 million Google Cardboards with the Sunday Times, I'm just curious, with this panel of consumer VR marketing experts, what you thought of that execution. How many of those 1 million cardboards get assembled? How many New York Times apps get downloaded? And importantly, I think from your perspective, Minnie, who bought out the front cover and the back cover of the New York Times Magazine, how many views of their backwater virtual reality experience are they going to generate? It's brilliant if you guys haven't seen it, by the way.
So actually, our agency, OMD, was one of our clients. She was part of that program. We don't have any stats to share yet, but I'm sure when the clients are ready, I'm gonna share that. But I think it's great, the fact that New York Times pushed it out to so many households nationwide. That was quite an achievement by itself. I don't know if any of you got the Sunday Times, but it was actually already, put together. I'm sure some people opened up the Sunday Times and they looked at this thing and they didn't even know what it was. But I think it's great for the industry overall.
Yeah, it's absolutely great for the industry. The challenge, obviously, is that the right target audience to introduce to VR?
Yeah.
I don't know if my mom and dad, without me telling them to build that thing, would have built it. So
honestly, in my opinion, with very few exceptions, every audience is the right audience for VR. I mean, that's the big win for VR and for the mobile headsets and whatnot, is that when we get more and more people exposed to it. So, and I'm not, it's not the target audience, right? It's not the demographic of, Gatorade or sports enthusiasts per se, but it is reaching people on a level that they know. Similar to how we're, putting content in the headsets that people recognize. We're associating, in a positive way, New York Times, right, as a brand, with a headset, with content, so that that person having it in their, with their Sunday brunch, that would never, ever go out and seek virtual reality in any of its forms on their own, are suddenly like, oh, it's here, it's New York Times, I like the New York Times, it's, it's a positive association with it. Very simple. It's like, wait till NPR, really jumps into the VR game.
It's going to be interesting for us. I mean, we sell direct to consumer as well as partnering with brands, and we've seen a pretty large spike the last 3 days since the New York Times have been out there. So at a very sort of small level, we can say that the exposure it got has had an increase in our sales. And I mean, I totally agree. It's great for the industry, like target audience or not. There's no
show and tell,
about it.
show and tell, show
Yeah.
and tell.
From a brand
Exactly.
perspective, if you're on the Times marketing team, I doubt they're thinking about how many people created these cases, right? They're a brand that's had a lot of pressure on them, and the perception of it is that they're not necessarily the most progressive brand out there, and I think this is a great way to help us to demonstrate that and live that day in, day out.
Yeah. So I think we actually need to wind down the panel at this point, so maybe we can do one more question.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I was very interested in using VR for amusement parks because it sounds very exciting to something that we already know. So what technical challenges have you had? Because already regular VR can get people sick. And if they are moving fast, do they get even more sick? What technical challenges have you faced?
Yeah, so there are a number of technical and operational challenges with figuring out how to make this work best. So speaking specifically to motion sickness, headache, and nausea, it's actually surprising if you're moving in the same direction and speed in the virtual space as you are in the physical space, you really don't get as much of those ill effect issues. So that's one where I think everybody is like, wow, I'm getting maybe nauseous in VR. If I'm on a coaster, it's going to be worse. It's actually way better because you don't have that inner ear issue going on where your body's feeling something differently than what you're seeing. But that being said, I mean, there are a number of operational issues. How do you get, let's say on a roller coaster, how do you get the digital media to be synced with the ride every time you go on a coaster, depending on heat, how worn down the wheels are, other factors, you're going to have a different length of time. So you can't just hit this 0 start button and assume you're going to end up at the same time that you did already. So you have to use sensors and other technologies to account for that. So there are a number of challenges. I think it's still early days in the industry for amusement parks and VR, but we think there's great promise there because, again, playing to that repeatability concept, I can have the same physical asset, and at a push of a button, I can have you go through a completely different experience. I can use that to create urgency. I can have an experience that's only going to be available for a month at a time to get you into the park. We see a lot of business in our parks during the Halloween time frame, and we put a ton of effort into our parks for what's going to really be 14 operating days. So this is another example of you could have a Halloween experience that's only going to be during October, and it's just a press of a button on the headset. So we think there's a lot of promise there.
Cool. Well, I want to thank everybody on the panel for investing their time and money in this industry.